We have some breaking news out of the Granite State, the Live Free or Die state, New Hampshire, that is very, very important to the 2026 Senate elections. Longtime Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen has announced she will not be seeking re-election in 2026, opening up the Senate race that could become a very, very close and pivotal matchup. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm breaking down this news that Jeanne Shaheen will not be seeking re-election, what it means for the 2026 New Hampshire Senate race, and who are the possible candidates on both the Democrats and Republican sides. Starting with the article on Fox News by Paul Steinhauser, it begins by saying Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire is the latest Democrat in the Senate to announce her retirement rather than seek re-election in 2026. The Wednesday announcement by the former governor and three-term senator in a key New England swing state will further complicate the Democrats' efforts to regain control of the Senate from the Republicans in next year's elections. The news also marks the beginning of the end of a long and successful career of the first woman in American politics to win an election both as a governor and as a U.S. Senator. I ran for public office to make a difference for the people of New Hampshire, Shaheen said. That purpose has never and will never change, but today, after careful consideration, I am announcing that I have made the difficult decision to not seek re-election to the Senate in 2026. Shaheen, who turned 78 earlier this year, added that it's just time. The senator emphasized that while I am not seeking re-election, believe me, I am not retiring. I am determined to work every day over the next 2 years and beyond to continue to try to make a difference for the people of New Hampshire and this country. There was an intense speculation for months regarding whether Shaheen, who first won the Senate in 2008, and who this year became the first woman in history to hold one of the top two positions on the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee, would seek another term in office. Shaheen had raised only $170,000 in the final fundraising quarter of 2024, which, for context, when you're an incumbent senator running for re-election, $170,000 in a final fundraising quarter of the presidential election year is typically not very good, which sparked buzz that the senator might not be preparing for another re-election campaign. Sources inside Shaheen's political orbit noted the senator did not emphasize fundraising in the fourth quarter of last year, which included the final month of the 2024 presidential election. Fox News confirmed last week that Shaheen had a major fundraiser scheduled for March 20th in Manchester, New Hampshire, one of the largest cities in the state. There's no word yet on whether that event has now been canceled. It has been 15 years since Republicans last won a Senate election in New Hampshire, with Democrats victorious in the past 4 elections. In a quote from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee spokesperson, he said, "No Republican has won a Senate race in over a decade in New Hampshire, and that trend will continue in 2026. This is exactly the kind of state where the building midterm backlash against Republicans will hit their candidates especially hard," said David Bergstein in a Fox News statement. But national Republicans see opportunities for the Senate seat in New Hampshire from blue to red, and the National Republican Senatorial Committee, NRSC, had already run ads targeting Shaheen over her defense of U.S. aid funding that the Trump administration is axing. Another one, Shaheen's retirement is welcome news for Granite Staters eager for new leadership. New Hampshire has a proud tradition of electing common sense Republicans and will do so again in 2026, Senator Tim Scott, the NRSC chair, said in a statement to Fox News. Former Senator Scott Brown, the former senator from Massachusetts, who later narrowly lost to Shaheen in New Hampshire in 2014, is seriously considering a 2026 run. Brown served 4 years as U.S. Ambassador to New Zealand during President Trump's first administration and has been holding meetings with Republicans across New Hampshire for a couple months now and has met multiple times with GOP officials in Washington. New Hampshire's popular former Republican governor, Chris Sununu, who has said repeatedly in Fox News interviews and other news organizations over the past year he has no interest in running for the Senate in 2026, though a recent news article that just came out may be putting that a little bit into question. Among Democrats, all eyes will now be on 4-term Representative Chris Pappas to see if he launches a Senate campaign. Republicans flipped 4 Democratic-held seats in November's 2024 elections to win back control of the Senate. They now control the chamber and are aiming to expand their majority in 2026 due to the way the Senate map is and its more favorableness to the Republicans in nature. Besides New Hampshire, the GOP is targeting battleground Michigan, where Senator Gary Peters announced in January he would not seek re-election, and Georgia, where Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff is viewed as vulnerable. Democratic Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota also retired and not running for re-election, but it is a blue-leaning state more so than the other states. So maybe Republicans could try and pick it off, but I don't think Minnesota will be all that competitive come election day. But it is technically possible. Democrats plan to go on the offensive, however, in Maine, where moderate GOP Senator Susan Collins is up for election, and in North Carolina, where Republican Tom Tillis is also up in 2026. And there's also the Ohio Senate race, where John Husted, the lieutenant governor, has filled the seat that J.D. Vance served before becoming vice president of the United States. This article, again, was by Paul Steinhauser, a politics reporter based in the state of New Hampshire. So, this is obviously has huge ramifications for 2026. First things first, I want to show you just a brief look at Jeanne Shaheen's election history as senator from New Hampshire. Starting in 2020, the last time she was on the ballot, she won re-election over a more weaker Republican candidate by 15.6%. The Republicans didn't really put up a strong recruit in 2020 because they knew Jeanne Shaheen was going to win and was going to win very big. And she did, 15.6%. This puts it as safe Democrat. And New Hampshire was one of the only other safe Democratic states in 2020 in the Senate, along with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Illinois, and Oregon. So Shaheen did very, very well in 2020. But her last time she was on the ballot in 2014, things were not that much of a blowout. She won against Republican Scott Brown, who, as the article mentioned, may be running again in 2026, by just 3.2%. Now, that being said, this, of course, 2014 was one of the best Republican wave years in a very long time. Republicans were able to do very well in places like North Carolina, Georgia, Colorado, Iowa, which at the time Iowa was not a Republican stronghold like it is now. So this was a very, very close race where the long-term Democratic incumbent now nearly was defeated by Scott Brown, who just recently had moved to New Hampshire. Scott Brown has now been living in New Hampshire for over a decade, so it'll be interesting to see if those carpetbagger claims and such by the Democrats are still going to be used as much, and if they will affect the New Hampshire voters as much as well. But a very close race back in 2014. As the article I mentioned, Shaheen was first elected in 2008, where she actually defeated Governor Chris Sununu's brother, John E. Sununu, in a very close race, flipping the seat from red to blue by 6.3%, 51-49 to 45-25. Again, this is on the same ballot where Barack Obama was elected president, and what was a very, very good night for the Democrats, where pretty much everything went the Democrats' way. So that's Shaheen's election history. As for the recent Senate elections in New Hampshire, in 2022, we saw Maggie Hassan win re-election over Republican Don Bolduc by 9.1%. This was a likely Democratic win. 2020, we saw Shaheen. Back in 2016, when Maggie Hassan first won this race against now Governor of New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte, she won it in a very, very close race, 0.14%. And going back all the way to 2010, when Kelly Ayotte first won the Senate race, she won by over 23 points. So at least the trend on the Senate level in recent history, barring 2010 and 2020, has been New Hampshire has always had a competitive, close race. And I think we're going to see that once again. Large part, Republicans are going to feel motivated by the 2024 presidential results, where Kamala Harris did win the state of New Hampshire over Donald Trump, but it was much closer than expected, Harris only getting 51%, Trump getting 48%. So much, much closer. If you want, I can go to the website as well, give you the exact numbers, where Kamala Harris won by 2.8% over Trump. And that was despite the Trump campaign, the national Trump campaign, really not even trying to campaign in New Hampshire and trying to win the state. So Republicans are thinking maybe they have a chance at winning this state, and now with Jeanne Shaheen retiring, Republicans have a better chance where the Republicans and Democrats are now on even playing field. So now, obviously the juiciest part of this conversation is which candidates are going to replace who. Well, on the Republican side of things really don't change all that much. We know former Senator Scott Brown is continuing to express interest in running for this race. I would say it's more likely than not he will be the Republican nominee unless Chris Sununu decides to jump in to the Senate race. Sununu has said for a while now, both in this election cycle and in 2022 and in 2020, he does not have any interest in running for the U.S. Senate. In an article by the Washington Times that came out yesterday, former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu says he was reconsidering run for U.S. Senate. I cannot stress this enough. The Sununu name is very popular in New Hampshire, almost equally as popular as the Shaheen family is. If Sununu were to jump in this race, I think that would shift the prospects of this race for the Republicans drastically. Such as, I would have New Hampshire starting out as lean Republican if Sununu were to run. But as of now, Sununu is still not officially announced he's interested in running or he will be running. That's a conversation for a later date. So going off the assumption that Sununu is not running, Scott Brown in all likelihood is going to be the Republican nominee unless Sununu jumps in. On the Democratic side of things, all eyes are on the two representatives in Congress from New Hampshire, Chris Pappas in the 1st District and Maggie Goodlander in the 2nd District. The rumors have been that once Jeanne Shaheen retires, Chris Pappas would kind of be viewed as the senator in waiting. He's been representing that district, I believe, since I think it's 2016 was the first time he ran for New Hampshire's 1st District. And or 2018 maybe, he's represented this district for a while now. He's the first person that comes to mind for the Democrats in New Hampshire, and he would most likely be the strongest candidate the Democrats could put up in the 2026 midterm elections. But he is in a Trump-friendly district, and he continues to win re-election by over 5 points in every election that he's been in so far. So maybe it's possible he decides just to run for re-election again and not risk flipping the seat to the Republican Party, which Republicans would have a good chance at doing. Now, maybe if Chris Pappas doesn't run, Maggie Goodlander, the recently elected Congresswoman from New Hampshire's 2nd District, maybe she decides to run. I don't think her prospects in a general election would be as strong as Chris Pappas was, but it is certainly possible. She's in a district that's +2 Democratic on the Cook Political Report. And I'll just show you this because I believe I have the website still pulled up. So let me just pull this up, show you what I'm talking about here. Here on the 2023-2024 Cook Political Report, Cook PVI website, you can see here the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire's 2 congressional districts. The 1st District, represented by Chris Pappas, is listed as even, whereas the 2nd District is listed as Democrat +2. So that goes into the overall conversation, I'm sure, about 2026. If Pappas or Goodlander were to run, it'd be harder for them to hold the 1st District than it is for the Democrats to hold the 2nd District in all likelihood. Now, obviously, candidates matter, and that may not end up being a big deal, but that is something that at least needs to be brought up in the conversation. It also needs to be worth mentioning that how New Hampshire has voted overall at the county level in the last few elections. Just looking at the presidential race, we saw Donald Trump do better in Rockingham County than he did in 2024. We saw Trump do better in Hillsborough County and in Merrimack County. If you want to look back at 2020 in the state of New Hampshire, when Joe Biden won it by 7 points, Biden won Rockingham and Hillsborough and Merrimack, where in 2024, Trump was able to win Rockingham and make improvements in Hillsborough and Merrimack. The reason I'm bringing this up is Chris Pappas is from Manchester, New Hampshire, in Hillsborough County. That's a very, very important area for the Democrats to win. They need to win Manchester, and that's something that I'm sure the Democrats will likely be targeting. So where do things stand right now? Well, again, barring a late announcement from Chris Sununu that he is going to run for the Senate race, that's all, of course, depending on if he does. Going off the similar statement with Brian Kemp in Georgia and Roy Cooper in North Carolina, right now, of the only declared candidates or publicly expressed interest candidates, we're looking at a Senate matchup right now of Scott Brown versus Chris Pappas. And if that were the case, I think this election actually comes down to the wire. I think it would be very, very close. I would narrowly give the Democrats the advantage. And I'm really on the fence between it being a lean Democratic race or a tilt Democratic race. I think Scott Brown lost to Jeanne Shaheen by about 3.4 points back in 2014. And I think something similar may be the case of Scott versus Pappas this time around. I think this race is going to be very, very close if it is Brown versus Pappas. Pappas, every race he's been in, the polling's been tight at times, but he always ends up winning by a likely Democratic margin. I think Scott Brown would probably be the best, most formidable candidate he would have faced. So I think it starts off as lean Democrat. But I do think it's certainly possible Scott Brown could pull off an election victory over Pappas and potentially even flip the seat red. I'm not saying it's the likeliest scenario, but I'm saying it is certainly possible. If it were Chris Sununu running for the Senate race, I would start this race off as lean Republican, and I'm so bullish on Sununu's chances, there would be a situation where I'd put it as likely Republican before Election Day come 2026. I think Sununu running gives the Republicans the best chance at winning this race. Will he run? Remains to be seen, but that definitely needs to be mentioned as of right now. though I do think New Hampshire still starts off, at very least, as lean to tell Democrat until we get more clarity on who is running for this race. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give the video a like. Please remember to click subscribe, leave a comment below telling me your thoughts about this video. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you in the next one.